All right, everyone. Welcome to the latest Unmuted podcast. My name is Jeff. I'm your host, and we talk about all things talent, HR, world of work, HR tech, AI, leadership. The topic today is building high impact teams, product thinking for HR. So some of you may wonder what that is. We will dive into it, not to worry, but it's a bit of a different way to look at HR actually in a product lens. And so for those of you who work for tech companies, know what this means. Those who don't probably don't. So I just wanted to just mention a couple of points here. But before I do, the podcast lives on our website, also on our YouTube channel. So some people have been going there quite a bit, just sharing your comments and so on. So if you're wondering where it lives, it's on our website, but also on YouTube also. And then we'll share all of the links down below. So just a couple of things first to point out to frame this conversation prior to bringing on Selina Miah, who's our guest. The first one really is, and I've talked about this quite a bit, is shifting how we practice HR. The old school way of HR is really focused on like policies, compliance, people management, administration. But what if we applied a product development perspective to HR? So taking product management, product development principles. So things such as iteration, feedback loops, scalable design to building teams. So you might be a little bit confused right now. Don't worry, we will, get into it. But there's so much that we can learn from the agile product world. And I've been in that world, for a long time. And I've seen it in action, and it does work. And I think that the second point that I want to make is a big challenge that HR leaders are facing today is trying to balance things like agility with long-term scalability. So how do you create global teams? Because all of our teams are now global that are both autonomous, but also aligned. And so you're trying to give people the empowerment to work on their own, but they are working in teams where they're, if they're sitting in all four corners of the globe. That's a real challenge, and it's been a challenge, especially since COVID started 5 years ago. So can HR strategy evolve just like a great product? Maybe. Maybe not. So we see businesses, pivoting all the time on their product strategy. HR can also do the same. And I'm a business owner, and I pivoted, 3-4 times now. And I think it's mandatory, it's necessary. And I think HR leaders and practitioners can really learn from that concept. And so there's a lot here to unpack. So stay with us, because I know that, all of you might be a little bit confused, but don't worry. Selina to the rescue. She's going to come in and she's going to help us. So Selina Miah, I just want to welcome you to the Unmuted podcast.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm definitely no expert, but I will try my best and share some of the things that I've learned along the way.
You are an expert. Okay. No, but you know what though? You've got a lot of knowledge that all of us can learn. I guess to your point, I think that given that you've got deep experience in this world, I think you can really lend a lot of insight into this concept. Okay, so before we dive into product, tell me a bit about you. Where do you live? Where are you from?
Now I can tell you a little bit about me. So I'm not actually originally from Canada, so I was born in the UK, but I have been living in Canada in Kitchener-Waterloo for the last, 12, 13 years now. And actually that entire time has been in tech. Today, I, am fortunate enough to lead a people and culture team at a company called Maple. We are in the health tech space. And so we are essentially a virtual care platform that allows Canadians to see doctors online within minutes. So I'm not sure if you've ever tried it or if others have, but it's amazing. We've been around since about 2015. So this is actually our 10th year. And we're headquartered out of and actually I have 10 years for Maple, and then wow. I on the personal side I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Okay, so my first question to you is this: if you apply product principles to HR, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. So in many ways, it's not actually so unique for those that live within the tech world. A lot of people might already be applying principles in HR without truly realizing those are the concepts. But HR is like a product function. So we're creating an experience for employees, right? That needs to be intuitive, that needs to be really continuously evolving. And if we think of HR like a product, what we start doing is we start focusing on things like user experience, right? Our employees, we start looking at data as a way to drive our decisions. And then, we're often looking at like, okay, how do we continue to make this thing better? And how do we make it scale? We don't just want to build something that's out there into the ether that there's no real value being added, or that it's used once and then it's forgotten. Like, we want individuals and employees and team members to continue to use this to support them with whatever they're looking for support with. And so that's very similar to how a product team would operate when they're thinking about building for their consumers and their customers. What it means to me, though, is HR is never done, right? Like, just because we're launching a new framework or a new program, it doesn't mean that that's set in stone. Like, we have to be really agile. And when we use the term agile, it means like we're not going to be stagnant. It cannot just stay the same. It needs to continue to evolve. We need to test. We need to learn from feedback, and then we need to like make some improvements and reship it based on employee feedback. And along that, like, we want to be able to celebrate the wins and own mistakes. Like, we're not always going to get it right. And so if you take a bit of a product mindset, like product development, you will continually look to make things better. And so that's kind of what it means to me.
Okay. So there was a lot there, and there was some stuff in there that sort of segues into my next question. Really, is about how do you apply this to HR, right? So we're talking about taking like an agile mindset, feedback loops, iteration, celebrating wins, all these great things. But is there an easy way, well, not easy, but like a simplistic or a simple way that you can tell people how to apply that to HR?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a couple of examples of ways we're actually doing it right now. One of the most recent things that we did was to redesign our onboarding. And so before, onboarding was what it was. People kind of joined the company and, went through a couple of sessions, but we were getting some feedback that some of the information was lost. People didn't know where to find the information, maybe didn't have like mentorship or a buddy or support. And so what we started to do was gather feedback. And instead of rehauling the whole thing, we needed to see if it was going to work. Like, what if we rehauled all of onboarding and then it still wasn't providing the value in the way that we need it to be? So what we said is like, let's gather feedback. Let's look at like quick wins and what we can change. And so we started to make small version edits to the onboarding. A lot of it was like with the information, when it was happening, how it was happening. And so the data was driving some of those decisions to make those changes. So we gathered that data, we made small changes, and then we looked again to see like what some of the feedback was coming in. And then we were looking at how from that we could also build repeatable and automated workflows to make the experience easier. So think, pre-onboarding emails, manager checklist, buddy systems. So all of these things, we didn't do this huge overhaul. We made small tweaks, but it's still ongoing. Like, we're not done. We're going through another iteration of this onboarding this year where we're going to look at, okay, what other content is really going to help elevate, an employee's onboarding journey. So we're going through additional iterations this year based on like continuous incoming feedback. So I would say that's one. The other one that we're currently looking at is implementing Jira. So, when you think about, again, like applying product principles and product development, it's like, how can things scale? And so, we're looking at very much like streamlining how we can manage all of our like incoming HR requests. And so when we've been working in the sandbox as a part of this, we've been thinking about the user experience. So one of the reasons we're doing this is to solve for the fact that there's a lot of like questions that come in. We want to make sure, our customers, who are our employees, are getting the answers in a timely way. But we're also thinking about like if they're using this platform and this tool, they're going in, what buttons are they clicking? How many clicks is it? What is the user experience within this system? Is it intuitive? So we've been playing in the sandbox to really build something that is very user friendly. And again, like, we're going to do feedback loops and sessions so that we can see what's working, what's not. It hasn't been implemented yet. We're actually going live in a couple of weeks. Yeah, that would be another example.
So those are great examples. And I just have it on my, HR pad again. So obviously this is a bit of a change in how typical HR works, right? So did you have to make changes to your team, like in terms of not people, but org structure of your team, skill development? Because this kind of thinking and processes are very different. It does require skill, right? So you can't just tell people, go do it. So maybe talk a bit about that. Did you have to go through some changes on your team in terms of upscaling and shifting roles and that?
Yeah. So I'm fortunate enough to say, like, I have a smaller team who are very nimble and, willing to jump into things. And so I think realistically that's what it initially takes, is just, willing to kind of be all the way in. But there were some, frameworks that we applied. So one of the ways that we do this is very early on, actually before the year begins, we look at like, well, what are the business priorities, and how do we ensure that what we're doing as a part of our strategy and our roadmap ladders to those business priorities and to the strategy. So we get into a room. We often actually spend a lot of time brainstorming, whiteboarding, and really answering questions that leads us to what our roadmap is. So very much like a product roadmap, we do that roadmap for the people team. And what we also look at is data. So we look at our hiring data, we look at our engagement data, we look at our attrition data. So there's multiple data points we look at and we say, okay, this is kind of where we can see an opportunity or a problem that we need to solve. Right. So that's kind of how we start. So that's how we start the year. And then what we do is every quarter we have another kind of regroup to look back at the quarter to see what's been shipped, and then look at the next quarter moving forward. That I would say is just like a framework of working that we implemented that was new for the team. In addition to that, it's just adopting rituals. We have monthly kind of, they're not stand-ups, but we have monthly project look-backs. We have sprint stand-ups whenever we have like a really big milestone that we need to achieve, and we have work-back plans. We have like project briefs, and all of these things are just the tools that we use to support that kind of adoption of product development principles so that we can then build in the way that we need to.
So really, I guess the moral of the story here was that you didn't have to sort of blow things up. It was more or less to bring in new concepts, new ideas, new skills, but it was you that led that charge, which I think is really, really important, because I think a lot of HR leaders are afraid to change because they're afraid that their team may not be able to catch up. But I think here it's a shift in mindset, shift in how the leader kind of approaches working with their team. So I think you've done a good job on that. So, okay. So I just want to talk about HR strategy, because obviously like HR strategy is a huge thing. And I think the reason why, that I'm asking this question is because in my career, when I built an HR strategy, I know that it's going to change, and it changes every quarter, actually. And so people think I'm nuts. Well, it's crazy. I'm like, no, because if you're working in a business that's constantly changing and it's agile, you better go with it. You need to be in front of it. So I guess I'm just kind of, being really specific here. How can you apply product principles to building an HR strategy, and then how does it look?
Yeah. So I think with any strategy, there's a North Star, and that North Star is the company's purpose. It's the department or function's purpose. Like that's where you start. And that doesn't change. Like your purpose doesn't change, right? Like it is something that is often evergreen. You're constantly working towards it. But what can change and what does change is the product roadmap on the product side, and in our case, the people roadmap, and the tactics that are used to still continue to try to achieve that North Star. And so, I kind of mentioned this in the most recent question, but we do a yearly approach of looking at like, okay, what do we want to focus on in 2025? Like we did that exercise at the end of 2024, but it's not that we built it and it's static. It doesn't stay the exact same. So what we do is we plan out like, this is what we want to do for the year. At the end of the year, if we've been able to do X and we've set like a really high level KPI or metric, and this isn't it, but I'll give you an example. Like we want to become a top employer in Ontario. Like let's say that's the end goal. We want to create organizational transformation in these 3 ways. That can be that really high level metric by the end of the year that then ladders up to the purpose. But what we will do is we will change the ways that we work through the year where we can still then achieve that like high level goal. And we only plan a quarter at a time. So we've got the purpose, the North Star, we've got the like 1 year priority, end of year, we will achieve X, but how we're going to do that can shift quarter to quarter. So we plan for the quarter and we say, these are the 3 things that we need to get done this quarter that will allow us to continue to achieve X by the end of the year. And then we will revisit that every quarter along with the business, because if the business has shifted something or something's changed, like we know from COVID and from, the economic downturn, like there's always going to be times you have to pivot. And so it allows us to have that agility.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Yeah, I think that allows you to be flexible and agile. I mean, if you plan for the whole year and then you work backwards, I don't even know what I'm doing next month. So that's why it's really important. If you're trying to take a product mindset, you need to be much shorter And I think if you can do that, then it'll be much easier to manage. I sort of alluded to this point earlier, because obviously with COVID starting 5 years ago, what happened was our team, we sort of shifted away from the sort of physical office space, going into an office every day, more to a sort of work anywhere kind of thing, or a hybrid or whatever it is. But also, we've also seen a shift in where people are. So it's not just all centered in Toronto or one place. They're all over the place. So obviously technology plays a big role in that. How do you design team to be both autonomous but also aligned with the broader company vision?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Maple, we are a hybrid organization. So we spend a couple of days in office and, a few days at home. We have some people that are remote based on where we live, but predominantly we are hybrid. Designing the team for autonomy really starts with clarity. And so again, I kind of just alluded to this too, but the North Star, the clarity of purpose or mission, vision, whatever, each company calls it needs to stop there. That needs to feel really, really clear, and it needs to feel really inspiring. We actually just went through our unveiling of our company's new purpose and our 10-year BHAG, which is like our big, hairy, audacious goal that we have. And so it starts with that clarity, and teams should really understand how the work that they do ladders up to the broader company vision, to the purpose, and then have decision-making power at the department level, at the team level, to then support that overarching purpose. So we just unveiled it. We did it actually at Town Hall because we felt that would be a really great opportunity to do that. And so I think once you've done that and started with that piece of clarity, there's some guardrails, right, that you need to kind of introduce to support with autonomy and people feeling empowered to align with the broader company vision. So what we look to do, and as an HR function, we look to provide teams with the right kind of frameworks, with the right principles. I don't like the word policies. I know policies have to be created. I actually think they're just an outcome of a much larger thing. And so, it's frameworks, principles, concepts, success metrics. We are successful if we are able to do this rather than rigid rules. So I would say that's kind of a key principle that I personally like to follow. And that's one that, we implement at Maple too. Then the other piece is empowering with context, right? Instead of dictating how work should be done, it's very much giving teams the right level of information, the business priorities and the information they need at the right time so that they have the insights so that they can move forward. So again, when we think about autonomy, broader company vision, that's kind of a way, that's a principle too. We used to follow the OKR model. We've actually just shifted away from we used to very much up until December. But what we found is so much time was spent on the administration of OKRs than actually having what we really wanted, which was true alignment and the ability to, shift things in an agile and quick way to meet the business objectives. We shifted from that model to what we are calling the scaling out model. And it is very much around that purpose. What we have a 10-year big, hairy, audacious goal. And then we have 5-year, 3-year, and 1-year highly achievable goals. So we've shifted to that model this year. And then within that model too, so I mentioned guardrails, we try to empower with context and then have really, really clear connection points. So clear rituals, cross-functional stand-ups, check-ins, monthly all hands where we can, share really critical pieces of information tied back to knowledge hubs. We use Confluence as our knowledge hub. So we put a lot of information in. And then we look to obviously put in place decision-making frameworks and RACIs. So this is at a tactical level where project briefs and whatnot come into play, which is who's directly responsible for this and accountable, who's the decision maker in getting these pieces of work or bring these pieces of work to life. So that's, I would say, how we try to approach it.
So do you use software or technology to bring it all together?
We actually have a ton of different things we use. I mentioned Confluence as our knowledge. We use Asana as our project. We've just implemented something called Glean, which I'm sure a lot of people know, but it's an AI technology that's really, knowledge gathering, information gathering. For a lot of, we try to create some autonomy where people are looking for information through Glean. And then, for automation, I mentioned that we use things like Jira. On the HR side, we have other tools for HRS and for recognition too, because recognition is really important when we're thinking about feeling autonomous and feeling empowered. We use a tool called Lattice and Kudos. So those are a few that we use.
Okay, so that's good context there. So just my last question for you, I asked all of our guests the same question. If there's one thing that our guests can learn from anything that you've talked about today, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, my one piece of, or not advice, but hopefully one thing that maybe someone could learn from this conversation is it is not about being policy driven. I say it's about being strategy driven. And if we're strategy driven and, those product principles are going to apply because we are looking to always align what we're doing with the strategy, with the business, which means if the business is moving and evolving and changing course and, direction, we need to too. And so HR can be seen as really rigid, inflexible. As soon as you shift your ideas and plans to support the broader business strategy and show how any investment that you're making into HR is going to directly tie back to that and what the outcomes of those will be, like there's going to be buy-in from leaders and stakeholders and employees. And so the one thing that I care most deeply about is designing for people, but with them. So it's nodding off in an ether and designing without feedback, without buy-in. We need early buy-in from all the people that matter, including employees, mostly employees. And so that would be like my piece of advice is that way of thinking.
I think that's solid advice. I mean, I've been in HR for many years. When I have led HR teams for tech companies, one thing that I always believed in is that product runs tech company. So what I mean by that is that they're right in the middle because they're the conduit, between development, design, QA, and your sales teams and your finance teams and your marketing teams and your customer service team. So they're that conduit because they understand everything. So if that's true, then it makes sense for HR to follow that mindset as well. So it's really powerful stuff. So I just want to thank you for being here. For all of our listeners, this is the Unmuted Podcast. I'm Jeff, your host, and the podcast lives on Go ScaleHR, our website. We're going to be going through a bit of an overhaul next quarter, which is great, and also on our YouTube channel. So please drop a comment. Please want to hear from you. And so, Selina, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great time.